Hey Levs, my name is Iphannie and this is the Iphanniebgentle podcast. Today's episode is going to be a juicy one because we're going to be talking about sex. Because we're going to be talking about sex, I thought I might spice things up a little bit. These last 6 episodes, you've heard my advice and opinions, but now I think it's time you heard from my sweetheart. So, sweetheart, tell them a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm just a guy and giving the guy's perspective, so yeah, that's it.
Guys, he's actually very shy and nervous about this podcast. But thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited to have you because this topic we speak pretty freely about on a daily basis. So I would just love to pick your brain. Wow. So we can talk about a few things we don't really deep dive into. So now I know a lot of you guys are probably like, you're young. What do you know about sex? But the truth is, I know a lot about sex. I'm not a certified sexpert like some people are, but I know a thing or two about sex. So let's take a deep dive into what sex is and how it impacts relationships. What is sex? Honestly, if you have to ask that question, then you probably shouldn't be listening to my podcast. Let's break things down. On this episode, I'm going to break things down into 2 basic groups, men and women. A man and a woman can fall under whatever capacity you believe a man and a woman falls under. So, sweetheart, what does sex mean to a man?
Sex means to a man pretty much any physical, sexual type of encounter with a woman. Or if, you swing that way, man, or whatever the situation is with you. But some men believe that sex is more than just a physical encounter. It could be a mental stimulation from, the opposite person that can trigger something. So, it just depends on the person and how they feel. But, for most men, it's probably, something physical. So, yeah.
That's really interesting. So according to Dr. Lindsay Gibson, sex can satisfy multiple needs at several levels for a man, giving him an opportunity to feel closeness, vulnerability, reassurance, and self-transcendence all in one experience. What do you think sex means to a woman?
For a woman, it's probably more mental. They have to be mentally engaged with someone in order to have sex. But then you got women that are like guys and, they kind of just want to stick and move just like some guys. So, hey, it just all depends on the person.
That's funny that you said stick and move. So according to Nick Notes, a dating and confidence consultant, to a woman, sex is when we're at our most vulnerable, especially for many women. It's intimidating, potentially dangerous, and forces some of your greatest insecurities to surface. A woman is making a huge investment when she allows someone to enter her. To me, sex is absolutely when I am at my most vulnerable, apart from childbirth. Childbirth had me feeling all kinds of vulnerable, especially because there were complete strangers who were seeing me completely naked and in undescribable pain. So sex is kind of the same thing except for the pain part. I took a poll on Instagram about how often specifically married couples should have sex. Now, I was actually pretty surprised by the results of that poll. My friends list is extremely diverse being men and women between the ages of 18 to 50. And yes, I do have some 50-year-olds that follow me on Instagram, guys. They believed a married couple should have sex between 3 to 6 times a week. There were a few people who believe a married couple should have sex multiple times a day, every day. Now, I don't know who has time to have sex multiple times a day when you're married, employed, and have children, but that was what the results said. So how often do you think a married couple should have sex?
I believe the average married couple should have sex 1 to 3 times a week. Just because the average couple will both go to work, typically, come home tired. If they have kids, they kind of alternate shifts. So it's probably hard to get a lot of time together unless it's on the weekend and you have to squeeze it in. So I would say 1 to 3 times.
I believe you too. I definitely agree with that. I don't think there should be a minimum or a maximum amount of times a week that a married couple should have sex. However, I do believe that a married couple who live together shouldn't go weeks without having sex. Now, the reason I said a married couple who live together shouldn't go weeks without having sex is because there are some couples that are married who technically live together but don't see one another for weeks or months or even years at a time for whatever reason, whether that be because one or both are in the military or one or both travel for work. There are other ways to have sex with one another without actually having to be around one another or experiencing intercourse, and that's by using toys. I heard about this one toy that can be controlled from anywhere in the world. It's easy for one or both spouses to have the controller and FaceTime or video call one another and please one another. What about toys? Do you think couples should speak about toys prior to becoming intimate, or do you think they should just be willing to explore the toys eventually?
I think that, typically once people become intimate, it kind of just happens. So you don't really be like, hey, let's use some toys the first time we have sex. So I think that's a conversation that gets brought up after. Maybe once they get a little more comfortable with each other sexually.
So what if it's someone who in their previous relationship used toys and then the other partner never used toys before?
Then again, after that initial encounter, that's when you're like, hey, I kind of want to spice things up. Are you willing to use this or whatever? And go from there. I mean, if the person is open, by all means, do you. If they're not, then that's a whole different situation.
Are there certain things couples should talk about when it comes to sex prior to becoming a couple or becoming intimate?
Sometimes that conversation gets brought up depending on how comfortable you guys are.
And this doesn't have to just do with toys. I'm just talking in general.
Yeah. With sex in general, sometimes the topic can come up just in random conversation, and you kind of get an idea of kind of what the person likes, and when the topic comes up, just be sure to ask your questions then and maximize the opportunity to feel the person out.
I definitely think they should talk about what they're comfortable doing. Are there hard no's in the bedroom? Are there certain fantasies that they haven't fulfilled that they would like to fulfill? How often do they believe that they should be having sex? A week, a month, a year, blah, 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 blah. I think these are questions that should be answered prior to becoming intimate, because it will allow you to both have a clear understanding of what you want and expect from one another in and outside of the bedroom. Are there some questions you think would help a couple in the bedroom? What are some questions you think would help a couple in the bedroom?
Just kind of asking them what are their boundaries, and if they're open. You always want to know someone's boundaries and what they've done, kind of what they haven't done. So just in case y'all, in the midst of something, you don't overstep your boundaries.
So a finger in the butt versus anal sex type of stuff.
Yeah, as a man,
how far are you willing to go?
Yeah, right. Because as a man, you're not just gonna, stick a finger in the butt or just stick it in the butt. You know what I'm saying? That might just ruin the moment. You don't know if that person likes it or not. So talk about that.
So here on the Iphanniebgentle podcast, I like to give the audience a few do's and don'ts that will kind of get their mind going and help them take another look at some of the decisions that they've made in the past and better prepare them for the future. So here are some do's and don'ts for sex. You can add a few do's and don'ts of your own and also jump in if you kind of disagree with my do's and don'ts, so we can kind of talk about it. So my first one I have is do communicate about your sex life, whether that be good or bad. Let your partner know if you're enjoying your sex life so they know that they're doing something right, but also let your partner know if you aren't satisfied with your sex life so there can be some improvements. Then the first don't I have is don't let anyone outside of your bedroom know what happens in your bedroom, because you never know. That person that you're talking to may be looking at your spouse like their next bedmate. Do be clear about your expectations for sex. That be how often you guys have sex, where you guys have sex, because some people prefer to not have sex in the bed. They prefer to have sex anywhere else but the bed. I remember I saw an interview with Princess Love, and she said that she likes to have sex in the bedroom only. And Ray J likes to have sex everywhere. So that was just like something that probably should have been talked about prior to them becoming intimate. And if there's specific positions that you guys would like to try, believe it or not, these are important because, again, you both will be on the same page and it'll lessen your chance for any confusion. Don't go on more than a month without physically connecting. Now, that doesn't have to be full-on sex, but it can be kissing, cuddling, holding hands, just touching by any capacity. Physical connection can help cure some of the most coldest hearts. Do communicate about your problems outside of sex. Don't use sex as a way to fix your issues. I have had friends who would say, I love makeup sex, so I would just start an argument just so we can have makeup sex. If it's that electrifying, something is wrong with your sex life and you need to seek help ASAP. Sex just puts a band-aid on your problems, and once you bust a nut, the problem will still be there and eventually become so huge that you can't use sex as a quote-unquote cure. So, do you have any do's and don'ts?
I think you got it. Pretty much communicate with your partner. Don't, just do something. Talk about it first and then see what you guys are willing to do or willing to try and stuff like that.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for being on this episode and showing me kind of like the guy's perspective on what sex is like. I know this episode is a little bit shorter than usual, but it was just something to kind of spark your interest. I did a little bit of research on the topic beforehand, although, again, I'm no sexpert, but I do know a thing or two about sex. I wanted to make sure that I had all my facts straight before I came on the podcast. So, again, thank you so much for joining me, and thank you guys so much for listening. Until next time, my name is Iphannie, and this is the Iphannie Be Gentle podcast.